Saw dudes, MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES got a pretty sizable buff this patch. Now the sidearm damage bonus persists for 5 seconds after your shields begin to recharge, and sidearm kills extend the damage bonus duration by 3 seconds and completely reload your sidearm from reserves. While this is great, I still have some issues with the exotic, which I will discuss at the end of the video. Today's Strand Hunter build can have up to 7 subclass perks active: Devour, Sever, Suspend, Threadlings, Unravel, Weaken, and Woven Mail. This is dependent on our weapon loadouts, but it's still pretty insane. Sidearms are by no means meta, but I might be able to convince you to use one. This build is very long, so I encourage you to use the dim link in the description and watch the weapon loadout sections to find what you like faster. Let's get started. Gameloop first. Start by throwing your threaded spike into a crowd to sever them and create an orb of power. Collect the orb to get woven mail and activate your weapon surges. Kill an enemy affected by sever to create a tangle and either shoot it or throw it to make a Beyblade. When enemies get too close, dodge to create a specter and to get some space. While in critical health, swap to your sidearm to get the TRICKSLEEVES bonus. If you have a sidearm out already, swap to another weapon, then back to the sidearm to get the buff. Rinse and repeat. Soap Strike is an amazing super. It can perform ad clear and boss damage easily since it covers a large area. Marksman's Dodge made the most sense for the build since our primary damage source will be from sidearms. Plus, our melee ability is pretty self-sufficient when it comes to ability regeneration. Threaded Spike is a data knife from Titanfall 2 and is great. It's a ranged melee ability that can hit and track multiple targets. Hit sever enemies, reducing their outgoing damage by 40%. If you catch it right before it returns, it can return a large amount of ability energy or just flat out refund the ability. The two grenade choices are Grapple and Shackle Grenade. If you want another mobility or melee option, Grapple is for you. Shackle Grenade can stun unstoppable champions and provides another form of crowd control for extra safety. The aspects for the aspiring Titan pilot are Threaded Spectre and Whirling Maelstrom. Threaded Spectre makes their dodge spawn a Strand decoy, which lures enemies to attack it. When an enemy kills it or gets too close, it explodes, dealing damage and spawning 2 Threadlings. It's basically a better Loki decoy. Whirling Maelstrom causes destroyed tangles to become unraveling Beyblades that seat targets for 12 seconds, which exactly matches the tangle creation cooldown for a near unlimited uptime, assuming we delay their detonation. They deal damage 10 times per second in a 2-meter radius, create unraveling threads on kill, and can be used as a grapple point for unlimited usage. The fragments for this build are Thread of Fury, Generation, Transmutation, and Warding. Fury grants melee energy upon dealing damage with a tangle. Each damage instance grants energy. Generation grants grenade energy for every damage instance afflicted on enemies. Transmutation causes weapon kills to spawn tangles when Woven Mail is active. Lastly, Thread of Warding grants Woven Mail upon picking up an orb of power. Woven Mail now provides 45% damage resistance, down from the prior 55%. Let's go over the pilot gear. Starting with the helmet, I used Harmonic Siphon, Special Ammo Finder, and Font of Wisdom. Keep in mind that our siphon mods will change when it comes to our weapon loadout. With MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES, I slotted Heavy-Handed, Font of Focus, and Bolstering Detonation. On the chest plate was Concussive Dampener, Melee Damage Resistance, and a Variable Resistance mod. We're going to need as much survivability as we can get with this build. For the legs, I ran Recuperation and 2 copies of Strand Weapon Surge. Like our siphon mod, these surge mods will rotate depending on our weapon loadout. Finally, on the cloak were Bomber, Reaper, and Time Dilation. The best stats to max on this build are Resilience, Mobility, and Discipline. Resilience is even more important now due to the 10% damage resistance nerf to Woven Mail. I highly suggest hitting at least 80. Mobility will allow us to lower our dodge cooldown for more Threaded Spectres, providing another failsafe. Finally, Discipline will lower our chosen grenade cooldown. Because we are using a font mod, don't go above 70. Dump the rest of your stat points into Intellect if possible. If you're enjoying the build video so far, or just want Titanfall 3 to come out already, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and keeps you in the loop for new videos. Today's build has a staggering 4 weapon loadouts. I know it's a lot, so please just skip around and find out which one you like best. Weapon loadout 1 uses Michael's Reverence, Buried Bloodline, and Cataphract GL3. This weapon loadout can use Harmonic Siphon and either Strand Weapon Surges or Void Weapon Surges. Michael's Reverence is a very solid rapid-fire Strand sidearm that drops from the Root of Nightmare's raid. The Glock and Balls can have a near never-ending magazine with a rewind rounds roll. It acts more like an SMG in the way that it plays, since you can just hold down the trigger and wait for something to die. For this build, the best roll in my eyes is Extended Barrel, Ricochet rounds, Rewind rounds, and Swashbuckler. Swashbuckler is insanely easy to proc with our Threaded Spike and will stack with our MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES perk. Buried Bloodline is our second sidearm in the loadout and comes from the Warlord's Ruined Dungeon. It is a special ammo sidearm that fires at 100 rounds per minute and performs more like her crossbow. It double fires tracking bolts that leech health from targets. After killing 4 enemies with this weapon, we gain Devour for 10 seconds. If you have the catalyst, hits with Buried Bloodline while Devour is active will weaken enemies. This new dungeon exotic is perfect for this build since it adds to our survivability, ability uptime, and outgoing damage. Devour causes kills to refund 100 HP, and refund grenade energy. The grenade energy gain works in tandem with Thread of Generation. Weakening targets works really well with the MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES damage buff, and can help kill unraveled targets quickly. Cataphract GL3 will be our main boss DPS weapon. For this build, I went back to using my quick launch, spike grenades, field prep, and cascade point roll. Field prep will increase our reserves and reload speed, which is important when dealing with bosses. Cascade point increases our burst DPS and lets us dump a ton of grenades into a target without having to waste a lot of time. This perk is easy to proc due to Michael's Reverence, which has a high fire rate. With rewind rounds, there's a lot of forgiveness, you just need to make sure that you hit precision shots. Damage won't be lacking, even though we don't have a damage perk. Our double strand weapon surge mods will be more than enough. Weapon Loadout 2 uses Final Warning, Path of Least Resistance, and Semiotition. This weapon loadout uses Harmonic Siphon and Strand weapon surge mods. Final Warning can be our smart pistol from Titanfall. This sidearm performs like a bow and operates on a charge mechanic. While holding down the trigger, enemies within 24 meters are marked over 0.5 seconds. Fully charged burst hits fly unravel to mark targets. Hit-fired shots track marked targets for easy ad clear. Aim shots fire hit-scan projectiles that deal 100% increased precision damage. This gun embodies the phrase, size doesn't matter. Without damage buffs, it hits really hard. Unraveling targets is a great bonus which adds some AoE damage and lets the gun spawn tangles. When combined with Strand weapon surges and MECHANEER'S Tricksleeves, you can easily one-burst champions. Path of Least Resistance is our utility weapon. I realize that operating at close range 24/7 is dangerous and some want breathing room. Path of Least Resistance allows you to do that and still keep a fluid game loop. For this build, we're going to use the staple shoot to loot and volt shot roll. Shoot to loot allows us to collect orbs and ammo from a distance so that we don't need to stick our necks out too much. Volt shot lets us stick jolts to enemies and gives us the ability to stun overload champions. If you don't need the added utility, you can try out the new rocket sidearm, Indebted Kindness. I don't have a good roll of it yet, but from what I can tell, a good roll to try would be quick launch, high velocity rounds, lead from gold, and volt shot. Semiotition takes a step away from Cataphract GL3. It works well with our Strand Surge mods and our ability setup. I'm going to suggest a more fun alternative for this rocket launcher. Quick launch, impact casing, field prep, and bipod. Don't crucify me yet, I'm not done talking. This role specializes in dealing sustained damage to health sponge bosses and some light ad clear. Quick launch helps the rockets travel faster, and impact casing maximizes damage potential. Field prep increases reload speed and reserve size. Bipod increases the magazine size of rocket launchers by 1 and the reserves by 5. However, it does reduce the blast radius by 30 points, reload speed by 20 points, and damage by 25%. Blast radius doesn't really matter too much since we have Beyblade Tangles to assist in clearing rooms. Reload speed is negligible due to our marksman's dodge and field prep. The damage decrease is slightly offset by our surge mods and us unraveling priority targets with Final Warning. Give it a shot and let me know what you think. Weapon Loadout 3 has Forerunner, the Ikelos SMG, and Hothead. This weapon loadout can use either kinetic or arc siphon. If you plan to slay out using Forerunner most of the time, go for double kinetic weapon surge. Forerunner is essentially the Halo Magnum. You are incentivized to hit critical shots with this weapon at all times due to its ridiculous 521% increased precision damage against combatants. If you have MECHANEER'S Tricksleeves activated and swap to Forerunner, it will hit very, very hard. The catalyst doesn't matter too much on the gun and in my eyes isn't even necessary. Sacrificing special ammo for a grenade doesn't make sense when we have so many tools in our kit already. Plus, the gun fires at 200 rounds per minute and can easily run out quickly if you're not keeping track of your ammo usage. My best advice, if you choose to use this, is to pace yourself. It's literally an exotic perk. The Ikelos SMG fulfills the same job as Path of Least Resistance. If you skipped around and just stopped by here, Path of Least Resistance was used to collect orbs and ammo from a distance. I will be crafting my Ikelos SMG with Shoot to Loot and Volt Shot. As I mentioned earlier, Volt Shot allows us to ad clear and jolt targets. This lets us stun overload champions. If you want to go for a double sidearm loadout like Weapon Loadout 1, you can use Drang with Disruption Break and Swashbuckler. Disruption Break will cause targets to take 50% more damage from Forerunner. Since it is a debuff, it will stack with our surges and MECHANEER'S Tricksleeves. Hothead is just a solid rocket launcher. I'm using it because it matches the Ikelos SMG in terms of elemental affinity, just in case you want to run an arc weapon surge. I'm running field prep and explosive light for an easy to use roll. If you're using the Ikelos SMG with Shoot to Loot, it gets even better. Just be sure to use a roll that has impact casing for the highest amount of damage possible. Last but not least, we have Weapon Loadout 4, using Super Cluster, Devil's Ruin, and Cataphract GL3. For this weapon loadout, you can use Harmonic Siphon or Solar Siphon depending on how you want to achieve the majority of your kills. I would recommend using 2 Strand weapon surge mods if you are focusing on boss DPS, or 1 copy of Solar and Strand if you are doing general content. Super Cluster is one of my 2 favorite kinetic slot shotguns, with the other being Until Its Return. Since this weapon loadout focuses more on boss damage, it was natural for me to go for a Reconstruction and Cascade Point roll. While the gun isn't being fired, Reconstruction will gradually refill and overflow the mag up to twice the base amount. Since Devil's Ruin can instantly proc Cascade Point with its laser, you can let loose a barrage of 12 slugs in about 6 seconds. If you're more concerned about ammo, swap out Reconstruction for lead from gold. Ensure you're using a roll with Assault Mag to up the rounds per minute. Devil's Ruin is a fusion rifle disguised as a sidearm. Holding down the trigger for 1 second charges up a laser that can stun unstoppable champions. It's really fun to mess around with, especially in damage rotations. If you are really big into weapon swapping, you may want to consider using a solar holster mod on the legs so that you can swap and instantly fire the laser again. Since it can stun unstoppable champions, you can swap out Shackle Grenade for grapple instead. Cataphract GL3 will be your boss DPS weapon. I'll save your ears and keep it short and sweet. Spike Grenades, Field Prep, and Cascade Point or Bait and Switch. Cascade Point is good since we have Super Cluster and Devil's Ruin, both of which can land a large number of precision hits in a short period of time for instant activation. Bait and Switch will increase the total damage and is better if you are concerned about sustained DPS rather than burst. That is the longest video I will ever make about sidearms. It was fun, but it was a ton of work. Now my thoughts on the MECHANEER'S TRICKSLEEVES buffs is that it's still pretty meh. I don't like the swapping requirement for the exotic perk. First of all, having to be in critical health for the exotic to proc is annoying. Having to swap in critical health is paranoia inducing. In all honesty, making use of the perk is hard since you're more focused on staying alive than killing enemies to extend its duration. I think the final buff to the exotic should make it so that you don't need to swap to a sidearm. Just give it the buff. That's just me though. Let me know what you think. As always, thank you for watching and happy farming.